Seneca's view on sex seems to be summarized in this quote. If you believe that sexual desire was given to man not for pleasure's sake, but for the continuation of the human race, once you've escaped this hidden plague that is embedded in our very vitals, every other desire will leave you untouched. The ancient Romans are often seen as more prudish than the ancient Greeks, and the Roman Stoics are sometimes seen as more prudish than the Greek Stoics. Seneca's view on sex seems to be an example of this. And this view on sex obviously lived on in Christianity. As Seneca sees sexual activity, it can only be the result of a desire, an irrational conviction that something is a true good, which is not in fact a true good. In this case, physical pleasure. The Greek Stoics, however, did not think of sex like this, at least not all of them. First of all, it is not necessary for a wise person to submit to desires in order to engage in sexual activity, strange as it may sound to us. A Stoic can see the pleasure of sexual activity for what it is, a preferred indifferent, and engage in it all the same. Sexual activity just by itself is an indifferent. Furthermore, the purpose of sexual activity is clearly not just, perhaps even not primarily, to procreate, but to bond. Sexual activity can be a very important part of a close relationship, regardless of whether it leads to babies or not. Sexual love is directed at friendship, as Chrysippus says in his On Sexual Love, and it is not to be blamed. So Greek and Roman Stoics had very different views on sex, and the view of the Greek Stoics seems to be much closer to modern values. However, I think both the Roman and the Greek Stoics would claim that their view on sex was also that expressed in Plato's Republic. So who is right? In the passage quoted below, Socrates is talking to Plato's brother, Glaucon, in Plato's Dialogue Republic 403a, 403c. Can you think of any pleasure that is greater and keener than the one we get from sex? I can't, he said. Nor can I think of one that's more manic. But love that's of the correct sort is by nature a matter of loving what is well-balanced and beautiful in a moderate and musical way? Very much so, he said. So nothing manic, or akin to lack of restraint, must be involved in correct loving? Nothing. So the pleasure of sex mustn't be involved, and lover and beloved mustn't have anything to do with it if they're to love and be loved in the correct way. Zeus, no, Socrates, he said. It certainly must not. That, then, it seems, will be the law you'll lay down in the city you're founding. A lover is to kiss, be with, touch a beloved as if he were a son, for fine ends if he can persuade him. In all other respects, association with any person who is the object of serious attention must be such as never to suggest any connection beyond this. Anyone failing to observe this rule is to be subject to the accusation of unmusicality and boorishness. That's how it will go, he said. As Socrates is being depicted here, he seems to say that sex is inherently bad, because it can only exist as a fundamentally mistaken view on things, a passion, which is the view shared by Seneca and Christianity. However, in the Republic, one of the privileges that distinguishes wise philosophers from other citizens is that they can have sex with anyone they please. Obviously, though, there is sex for the sake of procreation as well in the Republic. It is the only kind of sex permitted between other citizens than the wise, but only when they have been matched for procreative purposes by the ruling philosophers. Apparently, the takeaway from Plato's Republic regarding sex, then, is that sex for pleasure is sort of fine, since it's one of the privileges of the philosopher rulers. But it can only be handled by wise philosophers, and it is in any case of lower worth than friendship for the sake of virtue. In other words, a view on sex that seems closer to that of early Greek Stoicism than to Roman Stoicism, although it's understandable if the Roman Stoics believed that they were just following the Socrates of the Republic. It is important to recognize that the views on sex among the ancient philosophers including the Stoics, were diverse and sometimes even contradictory. The differences between the Greek and Roman Stoics' perspectives on sex can be attributed to cultural, philosophical, and individual influences. The Greek Stoics, as exemplified by Chrysippus, saw sexual love as a means to foster friendship and considered it not inherently blameworthy. They acknowledged the pleasure of sexual activity as a preferred indifferent, which means that it is not inherently good or bad, but can be pursued for the sake of its benefits. On the other hand, Roman Stoics, like Seneca, viewed sexual desire as something to be overcome and believed that it should only be pursued for procreation. Seneca's views on sex can be seen as more conservative and align with some aspects of Christianity that developed later. In Plato's Republic, Socrates does not fully endorse either perspective. Instead, he presents a nuanced view on sex that acknowledges its potential for pleasure, but emphasizes the importance of love that is focused on virtue and balance. While sex is permitted for procreation among citizens and philosophers may enjoy the pleasure of sex, the highest form of love, according to Socrates, transcends physical pleasure and is rooted in the pursuit of virtue. It is possible that both Greek and Roman Stoics saw their own perspectives reflected in the teachings of Socrates, as they focused on different aspects of his ideas. The fact that Plato's Republic allows for some level of sexual pleasure might have resonated more with Greek Stoics, while Roman Stoics could have been more drawn to the idea of sex as a means to an end. In conclusion, the differences between Greek and Roman Stoics' views on sex demonstrate the complex and varied nature of philosophical thought in the ancient world. While both groups may have found support for their views in the writings of Plato, their interpretations were shaped by individual cultural and philosophical factors. Today, we can recognize the value in both perspectives, understanding that there is not a single correct view on sex, but rather a spectrum of ideas that can inform our understanding of human relationships and desires. Yannick. Perhaps the basic takeaway from all this is that there is great wisdom in seeing sex as a preferred indifferent. If we see it as necessary for our happiness, we are bound to become unhappy, both when we don't get sex and when we do. What do you think? Indeed, viewing sex as a preferred indifferent can offer valuable insights and benefits by considering it neither a necessary nor sufficient condition for happiness. We avoid the pitfalls of becoming overly dependent on it or viewing it as the sole source of fulfillment. When we approach sex as a preferred indifferent, we can enjoy the physical and emotional benefits it brings without attaching our happiness to it. This perspective allows us to appreciate sex as a component of a healthy relationship and as a means to deepen connections and intimacy, while also acknowledging that it is not the only aspect that matters. Moreover, understanding that our happiness is not contingent on sexual experiences can help prevent feelings of frustration or disappointment if sex is not readily available or if it does not meet certain expectations. This mindset promotes emotional resilience and a more balanced approach to life. In summary, recognizing sex as a preferred indifferent encourages us to find happiness and contentment in various aspects of our lives rather than fixating on a single source. This approach fosters a more nuanced and flexible perspective on the role of sex in our overall well-being and personal fulfillment.